Hello, and what makes a changemaker? Is it born from a single moment or woven into the fabric of your upbringing? Welcome to the Architect of Inclusion, a changemaker's journey, a podcast about the architectures of change and the people who try to build it from within. My name is Dr Milton Brown, and throughout this exploration, I will be joined by Eleanor St, founder and principal consultant at Kalinago Solutions. Elenor is an accredited professional coach with a degree in psychology and over 10 years of experience supporting disadvantaged and underserved communities with navigating workplace inclusivity. In this podcast, Eleanor and I will be exploring the foundations of her work. We'll go beyond the job title to understand the person, her parents, her childhood experiences, navigating race, class and gender, and the crucial support circles that helped her find her footing. We'll discuss the educational experiences that shaped Eleanor's worldview, the role models who lit the path, and the personal motivations that transformed her from a survivor of bias into an active observer and architect of equity. Welcome, Eleanor, and great to have you in our studio.
Lovely to be here, Milton. Lovely to be here.
There's a lot you've done, and we're just going to go back to the beginning and start with tell us about your background and experiences growing up.
So I was born in Huddersfield, and my background is in psychology. That's where my degree is, and all my qualifications that I've got is in psychology. And so my experiences growing up is a little bit different, I suppose, to everybody else's experiences, because I had a black father from St Lucia and a mixed race mother from Barbados. That's the side of the family. So it was, I suppose, quite different for me when I was going to school, because our family sometimes was the odd one out. When we were going into those places, we weren't the sort of the normal family. We was the black family, I suppose. So it's quite different.
So when you said it was quite different, how different was it when you went into these spaces? So right from a young child, you already experienced difference.
Absolutely. So I experienced the difference because there are like these harmful stereotypes around black families, and one of those things is that the father is missing. But my father has never been missing from my life. So immediately when you're getting dropped off from school and you've got two parents dropping you off at school with your brothers and sisters, people kind of give you a little look like, oof, you know. And it was a little bit challenging at that time, because I didn't think, well, why is it like that? What's so unusual? Everyone else has got a mum and a dad. It shouldn't be so unusual that I have one too. And sometimes people are like, is that your dad? I'm like, yeah, of course, it's, you know, it wouldn't be anybody else. So I think at that point, when I was going into the educational system, that's when I knew that things that I saw was the norm for me and my family wasn't actually a norm what everyone else had experienced. So when I went to school, I could already sort of read and write my own name, and I had a wider vocabulary than what was like expected. So you already had this, you know, how come children got this kind of vocabulary? And it's like, well, of course my parents read to me to make sure I was well read. And I think like there was that struggle to connect, because there's always this presumption that black families, especially if they're Caribbean, that they'll be struggling in some way or some form. So already that was a point where I was a little bit different. And then I encountered more differences as I went through the educational system. I think especially when I was going to, primary school, we were quite, had some people with like kind of similar background to me. We had some black students, some Asian students. But then when I went into college, that quite narrowed quite a lot. So there wasn't as much visibility. So sometimes when I was sitting in the classroom, I was the only person from my sort of ethnic background sitting in that classroom. And you have that kind of hyper visibility when you're sat there and you're aware of it. So anytime that, you know, you're not there, or even if you've gone away on holiday, it's like, where did you go? Whereas your average white student isn't getting that. Do you know what I mean? And there's also that kind of expectation that we wouldn't have been going anywhere, or we weren't going to be able to afford to go anywhere. Now, my parents and myself were working class, you know.
What brought you to psychology?
I think what brought me to psychology, I was really interested in understanding people better, because I'd had so many odd moments in my life at this point. I was like, really, what's driving, these odd moments? I thought, well, what's really happening here? And also looking around my community and sort of the lack of any sort of role models that I could attach myself to, especially in the school system. I didn't have a black teacher at college. I didn't have a black teacher either. When I went to university, while there were black lecturers, I didn't have any interactions with them because psychology is predominantly white. And initially, I wanted to write about things, write about, experiences, and be a writer for children, so that they would have books and people in that looked like them. Mm-hmm. And then as I came into high school, and at 13, I was able to pick psychology, I realized what I wanted to do was empower the black community, raise awareness for disadvantaged communities, and let people kind of understand the challenges and the positives of people from our background. So I took it, and then I went and did it at college. And then from there, I did it at university. So I went and did my degree in psychology. Then I did more psychology because I really liked it, and did the clinical aspects of psychology, really drilling down into kind of the mental health. And from that, I went and did coaching psychology, because I realised I found sort of my calling within psychology. And I was quite torn between going down the clinical psychology route and the coaching psychology route, because I had so much more that I wanted, to bring into that space.
Again, you went into psychology. What did it do for you? I'm hearing that you wanted to do a lot for others, and that's fantastic. Yeah, that's a woman on a mission. Absolutely. But what was it doing it for you? What was psychology doing for you?
I think it was bringing together bits of information that previously I wasn't accessed or wasn't talked about. So in psychology, you started to learn about bias. You started to learn about why people behaved in ways that might be unexpected. And the first sort of way where that came up was when people were looking at the bystander theory. It was why when something's happening, people aren't behaving in the way that you'd think. We'd always think, oh, well, if something's going wrong, people will rush to someone's aid. And sometimes it doesn't happen that way. And I was really interested in learning more about bias and the way it was showing up, and learning more about mental health and how that affects the community, particularly, from my standpoint as an ethnic minority in the UK. And also seeing within the community that black and ethnic minorities were really struggling with mental health, accessing the right spaces that were attuned to their background, having people who looked like them, who could actually respond appropriately and culturally sensitively to their needs, and it wasn't there. So I was very much like, okay, I see a need and I want to make that positive change. And for me, it was just piecing together those bits. So at university, I decided to look more into understanding ethnic identities and how that comes together, understanding community behaviours. And it really was at the point where I was like, okay, I'm getting this information, but also at the time where I was like, I'm challenging this information. This isn't quite right. When we're looking at attachment theories and raising awareness of we started looking at Freud and so forth. I was like, actually, this isn't true for ethnic minorities and their communities. And what we've got is a wealth of sort of knowledge and information that's been applied broadly across the space to people who are not from the same background. And it's at that point when I was doing my deeper psychological work that I came across what is known as weird cultures, so which is westernized, very highly individualized cultures which don't actually match the rest of the world. And what happens is we apply those principles across the board to everybody, and because of that you see the inequities within the system that everyone's expected to navigate. So it's one of those ones, when you become aware of it, you become more determined to make those positive changes.
And so do you see a difference in let's say, black psychology and white psychology? Because I think that it's a framework of reference. So how do you take one from the other and make it relevant in the real world?
Oh, great question. So I think there is massive differences in terms of the way white psychology and black psychology is applied. So in the terms of looking at the cultural psychology, what happens is we apply norms that would not necessarily fit the black community. So when you're looking at, caregiving responses in the white community, it's quite normal to have a very nuclear family. So you've got your mum, your dad, and your siblings, and that's it. And as you move further towards the members of your family, they're also further away from you. So what happens is you feel less distant to your cousin, and then your uncle and so forth as you get further down. But in black communities, it's actually quite different. So you can have a cousin, but that person is as closely bonded to you as a brother or a sister. And you can have a family friend who's been in the family for a long time, and they are given auntie or uncle status, and they will then perform that role as an auntie and uncle. And you might not even know that actually this isn't your blood relative, because the biology isn't as important as the community function and the family space functioning together as one. And part of that is due to the impact of the transatlantic slave trade, where it became more prevalent for black communities to do that. But it's also a layer of our actual culture and how we function as a people. And that, we don't have to be directly related to somebody in order for them to be part of our family. So when you're, in the workplace or in the educational system and you're, navigating that, it's quite tricky. So people don't quite understand why you might spend a lot of time with your cousins or nieces or nephews, because it's not typically done. They might see their family members at Christmas or Easter at a special time. That would be the time that they might not be hands-on involved in sort of the child rearing or giving their, views,
And even now that still happens. You take in Eurocentric frameworks of education, philosophy, psychology, psychoanalytical processes, and applying them on South Asian cultures, African cultures, and so on and so forth. So it's a huge challenge. Those who are receiving it, and to some degree I would say those who are still pushing this narrative that it's the same thing, and we know it isn't. So how did you then create your business to address this? And can you tell us a little bit more about your business as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So Kalinago Solutions was really inspired by my desire to make positive change in the community. I could see where things were not quite right, and I realized a lot of people within the community, they were going into these workspaces, and what they were doing is they were masking. So they were shrinking parts of their identity in order to fit in, and it causes a lot of psychological damage when you're going into a workplace and you're thinking, right, I've got to shrink myself, I can't have the same sort of expressions, I can't go in there with my full identity. So let's say you want to go in and you want to really bring your Caribbean foods into the workspace. Well, there might be people who say, well, actually, this food, it smells funny or it's different.
That's right.
But yeah, that's been people's experiences, especially if they're from the Asian community. They want to bring something in and use the same facilities as everyone else. And it's like people struggle with that, having those kind of conversations on, well, actually, it's not the fact that these foods are unusual in any way. It's just that you haven't encountered it before. You know, if you start microwaving bacon in you know, that is a strong scent as well. So people were coming into these spaces, and I realised, especially when I was doing my specialist mental health work, that they were being damaged by the workplaces that they were in. So I really created Kalinago Solutions to, one, be a vehicle of change, and two, also to fulfill my own kind of ambition of putting positivity out into the spaces where it's sorely needed. So when I first started out,
well, let me just ask a quick question then.
Yeah.
So not only you are giving the cultures in these institutions agency to say celebrate your culture.
Absolutely.
You're also looking at the predominant culture in there, which is white British people, stroke Europeans, and you're also navigating your own space in there of how you pull these together. Were you aware of those 3 points, or were you just so determined to go in there and do the best you can?
I've always, my father always told me, especially my mother, to be the best that I can be and all that I can be, because it's going to be a hard road, a harder than necessary road. So I think I've always been aware of it, and it's what led me to create my Unity Blueprint, because I realised that businesses, you know, they wanted to do the right thing, and they had good intentions, but those good intentions didn't necessarily manifest into good actions. And they felt like, oh, well, I need to do a specific thing for the Black community, a specific thing for the South Asian community, a specific thing for the LGBTQ community, a specific thing for people who knew are divergent.
Or Eastern European.
Eastern Europeans. And then they were having these, you know, difficulties in trying to do these specific things, when actually, if you speak to anybody from any background, regardless of, you know, their unique identifiers of their being, what they tell you is, I want to be treated fairly like anybody else. I want to be respected, and I want to be able to go in there and be who I am and do my work. They don't want to be treated unfairly, you know, because they've got a background that isn't the same as everybody else's, you know. They don't want to have to always, especially for myself, I felt that pressure, you know. You've got to have Black excellence. It's not got to just be good work. It's got to be outstanding work, the most fantastic work you can possibly deliver. And it leads you to being really burnt out. So as I first started off with my business, I was trying to put so much out there, like in terms of the kind of things that I was offering. So one of my big things that people liked was conversations around bias. People sometimes weren't aware of what it was, and nobody likes to think of themselves as being a biased person, you know, but we're all beautifully flawed. And one of the things I think where my skill set really came through is holding space for these conversations that challenge us, that stretch us, and that make us feel a little bit uncomfortable. And the best way I do that is by sharing my own biases, which I'll share with you now. I'm an auntie, and I take my little nieces and nephews out. I take them to the park, and when I'm in the park, I tell them, if you ever can't find me or you get lost, tell them, find a kind lady. At no point in my life I've ever turned around to them and told them to find a kind man. I tell them never to leave the park without me if they're lost, and I'll be looking for them in the last place that I found them, you know, where they were last seen. So I always tell them those things. Now that is a bias, because there are plenty of men in the park who would help a lost child get back, but due to me being a woman and the dangers that is posed, and me perceiving that a little bit differently, it's a bias. But once you're aware of it, what you don't want to do is give people the impression that men are inherently dangerous. You certainly don't want to be giving that to the children, that these people will harm you. But at the same time, I'm an auntie, I want to keep them safe, so I don't want them to leave the park without me. I certainly don't want them to leave with a unnamed man without me, you know, and I'm wanting to keep them safe. And when you share that with people, like, oh yeah, they actually can resonate with them in that way, where they're thinking, oh yeah, so now I understand what it is. And, you know, not making people feel like they've made a mistake and they cannot come back from it. It's about raising awareness of it. So sometimes it could be like, if I'm raising awareness about the struggles that people from working class backgrounds have, and then making people aware of people's positionality and the way that functions. So let's say, you know, they've got a disability, they're also black, they also might be a member of the LGBTQ community. I says that poses them each at a difficulty at each level, but it doesn't necessarily mean to say that they're struggling or in hardship, because that in itself is a biased view. It might be that they need support, but it should come from a place of uplifting without putting a viewpoint on them that doesn't match.
You talked about burnout as well. You just created a whole cocktail of difference and indifference and projection and transference and all of those things in there. How do you carry all of that? And your own self as a woman, the intersectionality of being black, a woman, and a consultant in perhaps one would perceive as a male-dominated environment.
Oh, absolutely. It is. So consultancy in itself and business within itself. So out of all the businesses off the top of my head, I think about only 4% are female founded. And of that, it's even smaller proportion that are black-owned businesses. So you're always hyper aware of that when you're in that space. And there's a lot that that you have to carry with you when you're trying to go in and raise awareness of these difficulties that people might have, raise awareness of the need for change. And burnout is very, very real. And it's something that I always have to be mindful for myself that I don't experience. So one of the things that I do to make sure that I'm not being burnt out is measuring where my battery is. So am I at 100% today, or is it that I'm down at 80 and can't quite get up? And recognizing it before you hit like 50% and you're feeling okay, like I'm here, I'm just disengaged from what I'm doing, I'm just going through the motions, and it doesn't resonate with me anymore. I want to keep myself in a state where I can go in and deliver the work that I want to deliver and make sure that it is the best work that I possibly can deliver, but without it being so overwhelming for me to do. So I'm big on mindfulness for making sure I'm not burnt out. I'm really big on taking that time for actual regenerative rest. Often we don't do that because we have a culture in the UK that stops us from doing it, and it's even more prevalent in the black communities where it's work, meant to be doing that hard work all the time. So it can be quite strange for us to rest at any point. You're always doing. So if you're not doing in the workplace, you're doing for your family. If you're not doing for your family, you're doing for your friends. So it's actually one of those where it can be quite difficult for black communities to rest. And especially, you know, with the stereotypes around hard work and resilience and the need to be strong and independent and overcome obstacles, it means that you can be left alone to do all those things. So for me, it was necessary for me to create spaces where I could go into to share some of that load and my experiences. So
who do you go to then, or is it that self-reflection, self-mindfulness, and making sure you find time for you?
Always like to find time for me. So the thing that I do is create my own Zen zone. So when I'm not working, I like to take time off where I'm completely doing something completely different from consultancy work. So it could be that I'm potting around in the garden. It could be that I'm spending some time with my family. It could be that I'm trying my hand at some DIY stuff in the house, you know, something completely different that occupies me. And then what I also do is I have supervision. So my supervision is with Natalie Lancer, and she's the supervisor for coaching psychologists. And you're able to go there and share those things, and it's a completely confidential space. And she works sort of similar to me. So she does integrative work, which is what I do. So bringing everything in, which can be more challenging than just doing one sort of standalone approach in the work. So I find that is a good space that I can share. I also do peer supervision and peer group work for development, so that I can see what other people are doing and share with peers who are on my level. I also go to spaces with adventure. They're part of helping businesses like mine to develop and grow. So I do quite a lot of things.
Do you actually feel pressured in those environments? Maybe pressure is not the right word, but do you feel the challenge of being a black woman, working class, and a professional?
Absolutely. So I absolutely do feel those pressures, and I felt them throughout my sort of entire working career. So when I started working, when I was 18, you feel all those pressures. So especially when your background doesn't match others people's backgrounds and their experiences, and what's the norm from them, which isn't the norm for me. So you feel that, and it can be quite a crushing pressure. So when you're going into those spaces, and especially now as I'm older, I'm aware of it, but I don't let it define me as I'm going into it, if that makes sense. So I'm aware of the things that make me different, uniquely different from other people and what I'm trying to do. So when you're going into that room and, you're talking with clients and the things that you're trying to discuss with them, you're discussing it from an angle that they might not have considered before. Mm-hmm. And so there is that kind of pressure to do well for yourself, to do well for the community, to do well for my parents, to do well, in that regard. And also there is this kind of expectation sometimes where when you're talking about, racial matters or matters in relation to mental health, that an unfair burden of that goes onto the shoulders of ethnic minorities.
I think one of the quotes I can remember, W.E.B. Du Bois talks about double consciousness, mm-hmm. living your life through somebody else's lens. Mm-hmm. And I believe that could be a challenge for black professionals inside predominantly white spaces. Mm-hmm. You walk in there and there's an expectation of what they want from you, and actually how do you meet that expectation with still holding your authentic space?
It's an incredible challenge for someone to walk into that space, hold their authentic self, and do what people expect them to do. And it can be a massive challenge navigating that, because if you do it incorrectly, or in a way that's, incorrectly is not right the word, but if you do it in a way that is not perceived to be in alignment with what people are expecting from you, that can have a myriad of consequences. So it can mean that you're not getting promoted. It can mean that people might pick up, oh, you're not as sociable as we expected, or you haven't done things in the way that would be expected of you. So like, let's say all your colleagues are going down to the pub, but you're a Muslim, you don't drink. So now that's a point of difference now that makes you a little bit standoffish, because people think, well, you could come into that space, but you don't have to drink, but it's more of raising that awareness. Is there another space that they could go to? But when you're doing these things, these are points of friction which people aren't used to experiencing.
But even self, mm-hmm. you feel you have to go,
mm-hmm.
To keep that balance,
mm-hmm.
but it's not authentic for you to go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mean. You're forever questioning oneself in real time.
Yeah, I think it's a real challenge. So for myself, what I do before I go into a space, if I think, ooh, I don't really want to go into this space, I think, what is it that's preventing me from wanting to enter into that space? Is it, a feeling of I'm going to be completely different from everybody else? Is it that I think that there's, the background's not right, they're from a middle class or upper class background, I'm working class? Is it that I think that it's going to be a male dominated space?
That's the gender.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And what about the race issue?
So yeah, in the race issue, it's the fact that you're going in there and you're the only one from that background, which again, it makes you hyper visible, but also hyper invisible, because nobody wants to draw attention to the elephant in the room. Nobody wants to talk about these kind of things. And it also raises there's that kind of uncomfortableness that you're in that space, which is supposed to be what business says is that, an equal opportunity space, but there's that, you're that marker for actually that things aren't as equal as it should be on paper. You know, what the reality is much different. There's these inequities, and that's quite challenging. So I think for myself, before I enter into any space, I think, what is it that I'm seeking here to achieve in this space? And if it's what I need to do, and I think to myself, I'm really big on authenticity, and part of my business works and my life works is help people to make an authentic choice that is true and what matters to them, because I help people to be the author of their own book. And if you let other people write down your narrative and you're perceived through that lens, it can be incredibly challenging for you to have authentic ownership of your life. And I find that what happens is you do it and it sort of eats away at you in that way, if you know where I'm coming from.
Of course, yeah, and I really appreciate your honesty. How much does your parents' values then enable you in these spaces?
So my parents were really big on me knowing who I am and being my own authentic person. So anytime I came back with any doubt about anything, you know, even with the psychology, I thought I want to do it, but I hadn't seen any like black psychologists ever. It took me until I was 30 to see one. And my father said, don't worry about it, you'll just have to be one then, you know. You know, he was like, you'll have to find, you know, other people who might be doing something similar, who might be able to help and support you. He would also help me with any kind of issues. So with my parents, I could talk to them about absolutely anything. Nothing was off the table. So if I had any challenges in relation to my racial identity, if I had any challenges with an issue in the workplace, they would share their stories with me of how they navigated it, you know, so that I could have confidence in myself that it's not just me. Because one of the things that I think is really sadly quite prevalent in the black community is self-blame and appropriated racial stereotypes upon ourselves. So often when you get feedback from, you know, a manager or a person in leadership, it can be like a self-blame. Oh, it must have been my fault. I didn't read the room. Rather than the room was not built for inclusion of these bodies in this space. It was not designed for that. So when you're encountering these points of friction, it's not because the person has done anything wrong, and stepping away from that blame. You know, even for management, they're only doing what leadership is geared up to do. And when you think about leadership skills in general, it is the stereotype of that. They're looking at a strong, white, predominantly male form of leadership. That doesn't work well for people from black and ethnic minority backgrounds. That doesn't work well for people who are neurodivergent, and it certainly doesn't work well for women, especially black women. It doesn't work.
And women, did you say women in general, and black women? Because
yep,
I think
even
diversity,
more so.
The diversity is really the difference.
Absolutely, it's a massive point of difference, but it's an overlooked one where people aren't giving that the necessary awareness, because it'd be like, oh well, you can be trained up and do the same courses and qualifications that anyone else does, and then you can put those into practice and not get the similar outcomes as your white counterparts. And that differs in itself between people from working class backgrounds, especially because you've got classism, which is a big one within the workplace, especially as you're approaching and you're moving further up the ladder, so to speak. You know, you'll see a much more bigger difference. So it's a big struggle for people to get on in those workplaces where they're not represented, they're not included, and or they feel like, okay, I'm in this space, but it's tokenism. I'm just here to be that face and not actually have any agency to make any change.
So what would be 2 recommendations to institutions? We've talked a lot about what's going on unconsciously. Mm-hmm. The elephant in the room we've mentioned a few times. What would be your recommendations for organisations who are, let's challenged by the diversity needle, the difference and indifferences that they have in those institutions?
Well, the first one I would say is not to be afraid of challenging conversations. In order for anyone to grow, we have to have those conversations that give different perspectives and different viewpoints, and we have to be open to those viewpoints, even when it might not be ones that we're used to. It's so important to have these types of conversations and to be receptive to them.
Well, that takes courage. That takes a reflection of self. Do you think institutions are ready for that? You may have the leader that is like that, but the institution is not. What would you say to that leader that is ready for that and the institution is not?
It's really challenging when you're ready to make change, but the institution isn't. And what I would center on there is what is in misalignment. When you can figure out where that misalignment is and where that friction is coming from, is it, reputational risk? Are you afraid of sort of the ramifications if there's something wrong, you do something wrong? Or is it that, the policies and procedures are not in place to do it? Because I think one of the biggest struggles is that people are ready, but the workplace isn't ready to change because it doesn't have the culture to unite people behind it. It doesn't have the policies and procedures that can support that change. And it doesn't have the skill set. They don't have the skill set to empower people to then evolve into the changes, into the space that they want to make. So I would say, don't be afraid to have these conversations, and you can just start small. One conversation that might be, you think, actually, here I'm going to put it on the agenda. So when you're going into that meeting and it's, any other business, raise it at that point. So it doesn't mean that you have to sort of derail the entire meeting, but you raise that. Any other business, actually, I want to bring in, I feel like here we've got this kind of spark. We want to do something with it. We want to have that courage and see where it takes you.
How could you help them through Kalinago?
Yeah, so through Kalinago Solutions, it was a big thing for me. How can I help institutions with these points of frictions and get them together? And one of the things that I spent several months building through the conversations I was having with leaders and management and HR especially was that they needed to be united. In some form, there was some misalignment and some points of friction within the workplace that wasn't quite right. And they didn't know exactly where it was. They couldn't put their finger on it. Something was off, but they didn't know what it was. And what I do is have those conversations. Part of my Unity Blueprint is authentic leadership coaching. Workshops that I talk about are on cultural differences in communications, understanding bias as it is and what that means, and doing it in a way that people don't feel judged for having these biases. Perfectly normal to make judgment. We make lots of judgments every day, but raising awareness of judgments that harm communities. I raise awareness of different people's lived experiences and how that can shape people in the workspace. I ask those kind of thought-provoking questions. Okay, so let's say you want in, someone with a degree. What do you expect someone with a degree to give? And what are we losing by having somebody with a degree compared to someone from a working class background without a degree? What is that? Is it that you want this degree because you've got so many applicants that you need to sift them out? How can you encourage people who wouldn't typically see themselves in your business to be to come forward and be part of it? Those questions: does your business reflect the community that you're in? Because people need to see themselves reflected within a business and within a community, because your work life, your personal life and your community, it's now more than ever intertwined. Back in the day, I think it was easy. You went to work, you did your 9 to 5 and you switched off. And I think it was easier back then because we didn't have social media. Now we're constantly on. You have work groups on WhatsApp, people on Instagram, and they've got groups, and it's so easy. So I think that's where my business, Kalinago Solutions, comes in. We really do the deep dive on where that friction is, what you need to do to just move one step forward in a positive direction and what it means for the business. So beyond things doing like box ticking exercises, there's no point that won't actually bring real change. And if you're looking for something performative, I wouldn't be the right one. You know, I want to make real positive change that benefits the business, so they understand what it is, that's measurable, no jargon, so that people understand what it is that they need to work on. It could be that there's a disconnect between management and front team, you know?
Yeah. What else can you bring to that institution or that individual when you are with Kalinago?
Absolutely. So I think what I bring to the institutions is being able to be that thought partner who's sitting there, who's really listening, who's being attuned to what's happening and working with them in a collaborative manner to find a pathway forward that works for them, that helps them to address the points of friction within their business, that helps them to understand the underlying problems and helps them to move forward in a way that is true and authentic to them, their values, and the type of work that they're putting out there, you know, to benefit the world, really.
Excellent. And I guess I'd like to finish off with, in a sense, what are the three things you believe, or the three principles or primary agents that a black consultant needs to have in this field? And you can speak from your authentic self as a black woman.
So I think being in this field, it's really important to have a good support circle around you. Without it, you're going to find that it's really challenging and you get really burnt out, because you're navigating, when you're talking about the difficulties that that communities experience, you're also talking about your own personal difficulties as well. And it's really important to have a good support network around you. I think the second thing would be being able to make sure that you've got that time for that rejuvenative rest. So rest that's restoring you, rest that's really making sure that you're not snuffing out your spark. And then the last one I would say is making sure that you're coming into this space not because you feel a pressure to do so. Often there can be a pressure for black people to fix all the inequities within society by themselves on their own, and that it is upon you as an individual. And I myself have had that pressure. You know, people have said to me, you know, Eleanor, how are you going to fix racism? As, you know, as though I had that kind of, I could snap my finger and solve racism overnight, you know, solve the impact of colonialism and imperialist practices overnight. And it's not possible, you know. So making sure that you're not feeling pressure to come into this space, and also being aware that it's not for you to do alone.
So, Kalinago, how does one get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn. If you pop my name in, Eleanor St. Hilaire, you can find me there. You can also type in my website, which is www.kalinagosolutions.co.uk, and you can find me there as well.
Thank you so much. You've been insightful, inspirational, and you've really opened up a whole world of what it's like to be a black woman doing diversity and inclusion training or coaching in white spaces. It's been truly, truly memorable, and thank you for sharing all of those wonderful nuggets, especially about looking after oneself. It's almost like breaking the glass ceiling without cutting yourself, yeah?
Absolutely.
So thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
And I hope you can come back in later on in the year and share some more of your wonderful insights. We may have a couple of guests with us the next time as well, so we can really explore this with other professionals.
Absolutely, that'd be fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And to our audience, join us next time on the African Descent Forum, where we will step into the room with more professionals navigating the complex dynamics of inspiring change. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.